Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And today we are going to be talking about Ripple and XRP, as well as the vast majority of crypto and finance. And we have a banger of a video today because what we are going to do is go in depth on a few things actually happening right now around the banking sector and also around crypto. There's a lot of things that we have found recently and a lot of things that have shown recently as well around our lovely friends at JPMorgan. So let's just dive into this tweet here from the Telegraph. So we do see the world's superpower central bank has made such a mess of affairs that it has to pick between two poisons. It capitulates on inflation, or it lets a banking crisis reach systemic proportions. It has chosen a banking crisis. So as we look at this, the title of this article is "Half of America's banks are already insolvent." Now, as we looked at this recently, we've seen that there was a major credit crunch happening and brewing. But also, it does show that a lot of the banks are insolvent. Now, what will happen from this? Well, we already seen a few things actually happen from this. For an example, over here, we do see that the FDIC allowed JPMorgan to take over more than 10% of deposits in the US. This is not the fact that they allowed JPMorgan to do this. This was their plan all along. Listen closely to this video real quick from actually CNBC.
I think that's the key point you just made, because there were other banks in there over the weekend. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, ultimately what the FDIC chose here is to allow JPMorgan to take over more than 10% of the deposits of the United States of America. So there was a special exemption there. That tells me that it was a little bit of a desperation situation where I guess the bids from US Bank Corp and PNC were so low. In other words, those banks are not really, I don't think they were strong enough. And our clients, a lot of our clients around the world don't think those banks were strong enough to do this deal. So at the end of the day, you had to go to Papa Jamie and, and put more than 10% of deposits of the United States of America into one bank. I mean, it does speak to the situation, I think.
There's a lot of hope that this will kind of put a coda on what we've seen, at least so far, with the banking turmoil. That this was the last big unknown resolution. But Charlie Munger out over the weekend with the Financial Times just saying that they are still concerned. He's still concerned with what he sees in terms of commercial real estate and the potential at some of the banks for bad loans there. What do you think?
Exactly. I was just going to bring that up. Nobody's closer to Buffett and Munger than you are. And for Charlie to come out, unsolicited for the third time in the last 2 months, he's making a statement there. And if you look at the insurance companies, one thing that I made very public in February, a point that I made, is that the banks were underperforming the S&P 500 by a very large margin. That's kind of a canary in the coal mine. Now the insurance companies are underperforming the S&P since early January by 14%. That is one of the largest underperformances in that short period of time. You got to go back to Lehman or COVID. So it's very clear, I think, and from what I'm hearing from clients, there's about $2 trillion of losses on the commercial real estate side because most of the financing was done at 1%, a little bit under 3% over the last decade on all these commercial real estate transactions. Those loans are, I think a lot of them are dramatically impaired with a 5% risk-free rate that's being put forth by the Fed funds rate. So the Fed is up against inflation, but everything they're trying to do to kill inflation is actually further impairing a lot of banks on the commercial real estate side.
So do you think,
I figured I would stop it there because obviously this is a 5.5 minute long video, but this is something that we have been watching for as well. Commercial real estate, it's becoming a big bubble, and it seems as though there's a lot of bad loans, especially for the banks. And also, by the way, what we recently noticed around a lot of those banks that were offering those loans, they don't want to lend anymore because now they are extremely strict on liquidity. So a lot of things are being constricted, and this is a big deal right now that everyone should be watching for, especially around those regional and smaller banks. But also over here, we do see JPMorgan is getting a backstop from the FDIC on the First Republic's real estate portfolio. They know commercial real estate is the next domino to fall. This is going to wipe out a ton of major banks. And while we do focus on this, what's happening? Oh yeah, that's right. JPMorgan is becoming one of the largest banks, as they already have been. But guess what? As we look at this, the end goal of the forced bank runs and collapses revealed. Centralization of the banking system. And we did see from Bloomberg opinion, JPMorgan's acquisition of First Republic shows the US trapped in the economic theory of the second best. It raises more questions and concerns about the financial system. And I actually responded back to Tony and I said, for the next wave, it will be centralized bank digital currencies. And yes, I do think that we are trying to get those CBDCs out. And the best way to do this is centralize the entire banking system and then release that CBDC. And this is going to be from JPMorgan. And this is all pre-planned. This is ridiculous. What do you see over here? A longer essay coming soon on my take. This JPM/FRC deal means the US regulators decided to nationalize the banking system. Shout out to Arthur Hayes for this. And we do see down here, the 8 too big to fail banks are effectively nationalized because they have a government guarantee on their entire deposit base. They will not be allowed to fail regardless of decisions they make, socialize losses, privatize gains. It's a great deal. But when called upon, the 8 too big to fail banks must absorb their terrible cousins who couldn't handle the rough and tumble free market. The prodigal children's equity holders will get a zero first, but the depositors will find a new home in a safe too big to fail bank. The government will provide role exemptions and rates on loans, like how the OCC waived deposits or deposit concentration limits, and the FDIC loaned $50 billion to our lovely friend at JPMorgan to get them to do the deal, but a deal will go done. The whole point is for the federal government to claim it isn't bailing out a failed bank, but a private company is. It's a bit of left hand, right hand, but those are the politics of the day. Just look at how China allocates losses as a blueprint for the US. As long as inflation remains high and the politics surrounding banking, credit, and debt are toxic, there will be more contorted solutions to try to confuse you as to who bears the loss. If you aren't one of the 8 too big to fail banks, you are screwed as long as inflation is sticky at these high levels and possibly rising. Today, I will choose a bank with large CRE exposure and 50% to 75% OTM puts that expire before June 1st. Due to the US debt ceiling debacle, no banks can get bailed out by the government. This is the perfect point of political paralysis to capitalize on another, probably several non-too big to fail banks getting deaded by the FDIC. So yeah, this is very interesting. And I do think, like I said, this is all by plan. They want this centralized banking system. They want this because when you have one, right? When you have one that is fully in control, it's easier to invoke that CBDC onto the general public. So as we really kind of look at this, currently speaking, there's a lot of problems arising right now around JPMorgan, but this has all been the plan all along. JPMorgan is the one that they have chosen. JPMorgan for the longest time has been the largest US bank, and now they're just becoming much larger. And those 8 too big to fail banks, they are swallowing up a lot of capital, and it's only going to continue from here on out. Now, over here, we do see from Digital Asset Investor, JPMorgan CEO held secret meetings with Coinbase CEO. This goes back to May 22nd, 2020. We do see down here, and this is from Ashley Prosper 1. Since the SEC did not tell Coinbase to delist XRP, I wonder who did. I would love to see the communications between, and this is from Brian Armstrong, Paul Grewal as well, and JPMorgan executives leading up to December 2020, and immediately after the Ripple lawsuit was dropped. Coinbase does bank with JPMorgan after all. I wonder if any ultimatums were presented to Coinbase in regards to its ability to continue banking with them. Plus, we know Coinbase's people are Ethereum people, and JPMorgan was and is in bed with Consensus. And Ethereum did receive clarity from the SEC via a piece of paper in Lubin's pocket, as well as the Ethereum Free Pass speech that Bill Hinman received $15 million to give in June of 2018. When you lie with the dogs, you're bound to catch fleas, and these people are heavily infested. And yes, I completely agree that there's a lot of problems here, even around Ripple and XRP with JPMorgan. What do you see down here? The same month he hosts the A16Z Crypto Startup School. Yes, that A16Z you guys have, May 20th, 2020. Again, Brian Armstrong. Again, this is also why I said with Coinbase, there's a lot of problems with Coinbase. I honestly doubt that XRP will ever be listed on Coinbase ever again. And yes, I do 100% mean that. Even if we did get clarity tomorrow, I highly doubt that it will get listed on Coinbase because I believe Coinbase is rooting against Ripple. Again, a lot of this is all pre-planned, by the way. A lot of this is one big show and one big distraction away from the much bigger problem here, which is the fact that, yes, we are seeing a lot of centralization of the banking sector around JPMorgan. But also over here, what do you see from Mr. Huber? It just can't be more obvious. Why not just be transparent about it? Banks like JPMorgan should be allowed to bribe the SEC Gov officials, but they have to disclose it or create laws that prohibits the public to disrupt JPMorgan's business model. Then at least nobody could deny it. And yeah, here we have from Digital Asset Investor as well. Why has Ethereum been completely left alone while the SEC sued Ripple and tied them up in court for over 2 years? It's not the SEC versus Ripple. It's the SEC Ethereum versus Ripple / XRP, and always has been. The Ethereum founders and their disguised ICO whales wouldn't hold up for a month in an SEC lawsuit, and they all know it. And yeah, listen closely to this video. I know it's going to be a little rough at first because the audio is a little bit rough.
Well, let me start by saying I think it's great for the blockchain and crypto industry to have players like JPM leaning in. Thumbs up. Yep. That's great. That's the only nice thing I'm going to say about this.
You mentioned Jamie Dimon, so let's bring it back to Jamie and JPMorgan. What do you think is going to be the thing that they will have to change the most or lose market share and somebody else is going to do better, faster, serve their clients better than JPMorgan or Goldman Sachs?
You can just hear the bankers panicking right now.
But what
feel the panic in their voices.
Okay, so I got asked this last week. I was speaking at a Morgan Stanley conference, and somebody asked me, there was this set of headlines about, about the JPM coin.
Right. Our company Consensus has been very prominent since the start of the Ethereum ecosystem. I can attest that JPMorgan was there right from the start before public mainnet was even launched.
This guy was from Morgan Stanley who was interviewing me. I said, so is Morgan Stanley going to use the JPM coin? And he's like, well, probably not. And so, well, is Citi going to use a JPM coin? Is B of A going to use a JPM coin? Is PNC? And the answer is no.
So Consensus has been working with JPMorgan for quite a long time, more recently, to discuss how we might work together more intimately. And so
does that mean we're all going to have these different coins? And does that mean we're back to where we are, where there's lack of interoperability? So what? I don't get it.
The Quorum team is heavily engaged with us for at least a year to facilitate transition, and we're working together on a shared roadmap that we've defined and will continue to define together.
One more quick thing on JPM coin. So let's think about this. The JPM coin, they announced for institutional customers, if you give them $1 in deposits, they'll give you a JPM coin that you then can move within the JPM ledger. Wait a minute, just use the $1.
Right. JPMorgan started paying attention to Ethereum blockchain technology even before public mainnet was released. So they started experimenting and building out some things when we were still building proofs of concept.
Well, I really don't understand. If you're just moving it within the JPM ledger, and it has to be dollar to dollar, a one-to-one backing, it honestly doesn't actually, I don't understand what problem that solves.
They had a handful of different teams that focused on blockchain technology, and we've interacted with them roughly from the start. We started to interact with them in a really concerted way around the time of the advent of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So we were two of the major drivers of that initiative and have been two of the major drivers of activity inside the EEA since launch, really.
Now, back to my first answer. Look, if it solves the problem of JPM being associated as they're leaning into crypto, yay. Mm-hmm. That's all I got.
It's after the press planting. They plant the press stories. They put out lawsuits. They create as much of a fuss as possible. They try to get their government friends involved. And then they go, oh, God, this thing's happening.
And that's exactly what is going on with all of this. It's just one big massive show and distraction, all leading up to the big boom. But the question is, what really is going to happen from here on out? Because as we really kind of look at what JPMorgan is doing and what their overall plan is, is it to slow Ripple down so that they can create their own solution? Are they working with Ripple? Is all of this happening behind the scenes? And that's the big question, right? But to me personally, as we really kind of look at what JPMorgan has been doing, it seems as though they are trying to compete against Ripple, and Ripple is their biggest enemy right now. And I would say that JPMorgan is probably extremely scared of what Ripple is doing, because guess what? Ripple is counteracting their entire business model. And they are taking a lot of dominance away from JPMorgan as well. And by the way, here you guys have 10 days later, the SEC sues Ripple. JPMorgan breaks new ground using in-house blockchain technology and JPMorgan coin to complete a live intraday repo transaction. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you guys, like, this is exactly why there's been so much delay. This has been their plan since day one, and it's all to benefit a corrupt banking giant that has now started to take over and centralize the banking system. And this is their end goal. This is the plan. And it should really make everyone sick in the US, because these are the types of people that are running the show and ultimately getting rich off of the backs of you and those that are losing money in the banking sector. These banks get swallowed up. Those that are the depositors, they get completely screwed. To me personally, I don't think that the FDIC has enough reserves. But guess what? They'll hand over $50 billion to JPMorgan to buy out a bank. Absolutely ridiculous. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, to notifications on, because of more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me over on Twitter, as well as join the free Discord down in the description below. So it's up to you all. Have a beautiful day or a beautiful night wherever you guys are on this beautiful world. It's been Nick. Peace out, guys.